All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to TableTalk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy.
Hello.
And while I mess with my camera, like I always do, today we'll actually talk about stats and numbers and which ones are, which ones do we think are important versus not important. I think it's a very interesting discussion because I feel like there's a lot of sacred cows when it comes to stats and numbers and stuff like that. And also, like, I've learned something. Why is it power from Anima Beyond Fantasy? That's fair. Power is such a good stat.
It really is.
Exposure. Dark. But while we're waiting for people to hop into chat, as always, we'll do a little bit of oh goodness, I dropped it. What's the word? Small talk. Yeah, small talk. So, Alex, what have you been up to?
Not much. I'm just getting back way more situated and living in my home country. Back at home, back into working. Videos are back up and running. So the only bit that's been bumping has been the really because I don't know if you've seen it. I imagine you might have. The thing that we've all just been discussing is the guy who randomly, completely incorrectly soul read me.
Oh, my comment yes, section. I've been reading that.
I think it is very funny. I am in no way like actually affected by it, other than like I just snorted when I read it and was like, "This is fun. I gotta share this with like the people I play tabletop with." Cause sorry guys, I guess I'm a min maxer. you know me. I've always been like that.
Yeah.
More in reality, it just reads like a guy who got upset at my jokey tier list for Pathfinder, and then projected really hard on like the type of player I was.
Yeah,
that's more what it sounds like, and I nicely just like replied to that because I wasn't gonna be snarky if someone's just like, I think that we aligned, because it literally ends with like, prioritizing the character concept over like the numbers, and I'm like, that's what I preach all the time though. Like all the time I preach that. I am on camera as making fun of the type of person this guy hates. So it's like, no, man, I'm on your side.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I don't know. There's the thing in niche hobbies is you don't have a lot of actual experience with a lot of people in the space. You just have the vague representations about like what people talk about online, or like the worst case scenario types that you run into, or you imagine, like I'm sure everyone is at one point or another has had a fake argument in their head with someone that just wasn't a real conversation, wasn't a real thing that ever happens. You just 100%. Imagine arguing about someone because you think of their talking points and you're like, what would I say?
Yeah, like it's the shower debate that you have where either you think about a possible confrontation or a confrontation you could have done better.
Yeah.
But like everyone does that. It's a very normal thing. And sometimes you get a false positive and you go at somebody expecting an argument, which happened in another way too, because I accidentally got annoyed viral because there's the Resident Evil movie that's coming out with a director I really like and have liked for a long time. And I think a lot of people are being really goofy about it, where it turns from like, it's the thing where I think it's totally fair to have issues with a movie and a trailer if it's a game tie-in movie and it's like it's not 100% accurate to the game lore. I think it's fair to be annoyed about. I think it gets to a point where the criticism stops being useful, where it's like, this guy, clearly he's never played a Resident Evil game. You can't prove that. The way the director's talk, it's clear he likes it. He just is directly appealing to one part of the Resident Evil like style, which is the body horror.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and like there's a lot of elements with this, or just misquoting and lying, and like that's the thing I hate because it turns into this is not an argument about is this movie going to be good? It like what could this do better? The point is now this is like a culture war. I have a line that I need to fight for. Like I am hanging out. I'm fully like working on this argument tribalistically. I have my tribe that hates it, and also it's just like I don't know, man. When you get a consistent amount of replies being like, "No, we should be angry about it," like "Fuck you, you're stupid for it," and every like name is like whatever Groiper or like white supremacist 55. You're like, I don't know. I don't want to align with you now. Strangely, I'm being pushed away from your argument.
Right, yeah. I mean, in tabletop scene, we got grognards who do a lot of that. Like, they think the game needs to be played in a very specific way.
Which is just like in any regard, I'm happy like the way my audience hits is pretty good because I mean I talk about lore, but a big thing I always bring up is that when it has to come up is I think it is incredibly cringe to try to tell somebody that they're playing a tabletop game wrong. Because you can say like, "Hey, you're not following the rules in this way," or like whatever, like that rule doesn't work like this. I think it's a different conversation. But
Right.
if you are legitimately the type of person to be in the like the Twitch chat of Critical Role saying how they could play their turn better, I think you're a fucking loser. And like I'm not gonna shift from that opinion. If you really think that like another person's game that they're having fun in is a place for you to, I guess, tell somebody how to optimize their fun, dweeb.
Well, yeah. And honestly, like, I'm going to bring it up. Legend in the Mist has taught me one thing, which is there's people who, at the end of the day, the appeal becomes more of the board game experience. Like, it's not, there's people who just would rather play a board game. It's more of, there's people who would prefer an experience that's like, I'm playing a really fun game and we get to role play with it,
Yeah.
Versus on the other side, we are telling a really fun story with interesting mechanics.
Yeah. Because like it's very much a taste thing. So I like that point to it. Because that's definitely I think the takeaway from our last week talk is like that line of what do you want when you enter a tabletop game? Because mine's very mood dependent. Because there are some years where I'm like, fuck, I want some like crunchy campaign, and then what we got currently, I'll be for real. I'm not a Monster Tamer fan. When I was like, all right, the choice between typical fantasy to Monster Tamer, I'm like, I'd rather do typical fantasy, because like that's more my vibe. But like the more, especially after the session 0, I'm like, fuck, this is gonna be sick as hell. Like this is the type of game, like story and type of interesting mechanics we can only do in Legend of the Mist. Because I don't know whether any other tabletop game we could do this concept in.
Well, yeah, at least currently. The thing is, right, what Legend of the Mist does well is you can gamify and add mechanics to any aspect of a story.
Really easily.
Really easily, like crazy easily. Like I said, when we're playing and you guys are going through your courses and I'm just giving you random trivia about, monsters in the world that I'm just making up on the spot, you guys can roll, to know the answer, or you can study beforehand to give yourself a tag or a status that you can add to that next, that next test, stuff like that.
I know I'm not doing that one.
Right, but it's interesting that you can, mechanically speaking. Yeah. And it's more potent because in other games, like Pathfinder, for instance, you could do the same thing. You could be like, hey, GM, can I look into this? And you're like, okay, cool. And then the GM's like, all right, you have for however much time a circumstance bonus to your recall knowledge checks based on this thing. And it's like, all right, the max you could give is like a +4, right? Or like a, on average, it's going to be like +1 or +2. And +1 or +2 is very much not that big in the grand scheme of what you're rolling on a d20, typically. So,
Like, I think the only form of math for a D20 game that actually is like pretty good is in Pathfinder. That's because the math is so tight. And like that is a extra like 10% crit chance kinda.
well,
Kinda.
it increases your baseline by 5 to 15% because of the increased crit chance. So
Yeah, like that's the only time where I think because if you're like, all right, and in D&D, like, and you get a +1, I'm like, okay, cool, I guess. Like I'll take it, but
but in Legend in the Mist, every modifier, every tag is huge because you start off at +0, you are at a 50% chance of success or failure, like at all. And then it's 25% chance, roughly speaking, of success with no consequences. And every singular point you get reduces your failure chance and increases your success without consequences by like 18% or something like that. Which, when you already have like a couple of tags dedicated to succeeding on the check, is a pretty substantial boost compared to, like I said, Pathfinder, where we just said it's like a roughly 15% increase for like a +2. So.
yeah, and like it is and like we obviously still love Pathfinder and all that because like I love just the wide range of what tabletop is because of the fact that like I can approach this medium wanting to, I wouldn't say altogether like different things, but there's still like a different play experience of I want to tell as good narrative as possible with interesting mechanics versus I want to play a really good board game, like tabletop game, and role play while doing it. Like,
yeah,
I can seek out both experiences, and I don't think any of them are lesser than the other, because it's taste. And at the end of the day, the real strength I think is playing many different tabletop games, because any game you play, you can walk away from learning why the game does something, seeing a different method of doing something, and I think it only improves your home games by just widening your perspectives. So that's the fun of all this. And then also, it does make you look back and kind of think about, like, all right, shit, well, this game kind of dropped this old constant mechanic. Do we have to keep it? Because like I said at the beginning, the idea of sacred cows and tabletop, that is my biggest thing. I'm a long time hater of the argument point of, well, we've always done it this way, because that's just limiting yourself.
Well, I think for a lot of people it's defining, because another thing I'm really learning is someone plays a tabletop game and has a really, really good time, have a life-changing campaign, and it becomes more difficult for them to see other games in the same light because they don't have that additional like emotional weight behind them. So it's hard for people who've played a game and like, because like let's be super real and super honest here. Anima, as far as like on the more gamey side of things, is a really fun game because it's something that provides you lots of choices and you can play in lots of different ways, and it gives you a level of freedom that other TTRPGs don't, while not necessarily going down the GURPS route of like you can make anything and then your characters are just going to be broken inherently because you're trying to get the most out of the game. Like, you can make broken anime characters, but
super easily you can make broken either good or bad broken. You can do both.
But I would say broken anime characters are kind of in a narrower funnel because there are just certain things you need to take in order to make broken anime characters, where like a lot of GURPS like systems, yes, there are certain things you need to take in order to break characters in those kind of games. But they tend to be a lot more open because of how they are. Like Mutants and Masterminds, for instance, which takes heavily from GURPS. if you go down the tech route and have, you convert all your points down to tech points, so you have a toolkit instead, it's like you just get way more points out of your points. And
you really do.
And the only downside is they can be taken away, they can be broken, which is not really a thing most of the time.
Yeah, like, it is, playing the tech stuff in Mutants and Masterminds was a real fun eye-opener of, damn, this shit's kind of busted. And so that's why I intentionally gave all of my things a weakness, because actually, the take it away thing, the fact it can be disabled, that is a weakness you pick to make your tech cheaper. Like, that's not even baked into picking tech stuff. That is because I opted in to do all of that for all of my equipment, because I saw that, like, I could just do everything if I don't do this.
Well, kind of. Narratively speaking, they can always be taken away.
Yeah. You can hit me with an EMP narratively, but, like, it is a thing where I think if someone is really dedicated to Mutants and Masterminds, you could make something horrifyingly disgusting with tech in the same way that you can do that with every system in that game. Because that's what it's the type of game it is. If you have a game and everyone talks about, like, exploiting it, there's a typical audience for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And this is why tabletop becomes such a prickly subject, because the idea of what tabletop game you're playing is so different based on fundamental things that different people value in different ways and interact with in different ways. Like, you'll get the grognards who love the more harsh, tracking ammo, hunting to make sure you have food, all that kind of stuff.
All the annoying stuff.
Because to them, and back in the day, it was more about that realism aspect, that grittiness, and classes weren't as crazy back in the day. I mean, like, they were and they weren't. They had some really crazy power spikes in some areas, but they also had, like, they just had more grounded style of characters overall. Like, clerics used to be able to, like, get a flock, get a group of people to follow them, and
that is something I've seen
them
a lot more in, like, older games, is having a lot of elements that are like, you have a form of, you're basically getting NPCs or something. I've seen that a decent amount.
Yeah, and so what it really boiled down to is, like, the dungeon crawl. Like, that's why Shadowdark is kind of blowing up, because what it has done is it makes exploring dungeons the game, the interesting part of the game where mechanics are focused, and that's the thing. So when you're going through and doing a Shadowdark game, you are living that old OG fashion dungeon crawl experience where it really mattered, what you were doing. Looking for traps was much more involved. It was more interesting because it wasn't a GM, do I roll, my trap sense, do I detect any traps? Back in the day, it was like, all right, you creak the chest open and you're like, I look for any wires, and that would be when you would make a check or whatever, right? It wasn't like accelerated like it tends to be nowadays, because the individual challenges, finding the floor traps, finding the chest traps, all that kind of stuff, was a much more involved and much more bigger part of the process. So getting through the dungeon felt more impactful because you had to work for, like, almost every step you went through.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and that's an interesting style of game, and that is different than what D&D and Pathfinder are nowadays, which are a lot more focused on, like, grander narratives. It's a lot less being some guys going through a dungeon trying to scrap together as much money as possible, and more about fighting the dragons and saving towns and everything like that.
Yeah.
Which was a part of the old games, but that was a thing that you did after you did your fun dungeon crawling stuff for a bit. And then you're like, all right, now we got loot, right? We got loot. We got really cool items. Now let's do something fun with it. And then that was kind of like another phase of those older games.
Which like makes sense because you know at the beginning of a game, a bunch of adventurers are basically a bunch of just violent vagrants. Because you're like these homeless dudes just go into dangerous dungeons, fight skeletons and zombies and shit. And like for a while, you're like, I mean, whatever. You're just some Joe schmo until you get a cool magic sword. Don't talk to me.
Right. And I mean, to be fair, back in the old days as well, they still had the grander, bigger adventures and everything like that, but they didn't work as well when you didn't like do your dungeon crawls first, because your characters had less stuff and you didn't have that kind of slow pace, like slow burn start to your campaign to see like where you started from where you're going. When you're at the end of your campaign, you're like, oh, remember when we were just crawling through dungeons looking for whatever scraps of gold we could manage, and getting that +1 sword was like the biggest thing in the world. And now, you know, I have this orb of annihilation. You know, it's like,
yeah,
you really get that whole range, and that's kind of been removed in recent tabletop, but that's a whole nother conversation. And if we talk about that, we'll just talk about that forever. So
yeah.
I think it's about time. Let's talk about the holy cows, sacred cows of stats and numbers. Like, what stats do we think are necessary, are important, versus what stats are not? And now that I have like gained a context, because last week we kind of were just talking about, you know, what's practical versus not, and we kind of started talking about Legend in the Mist, which removes the idea of a statistical value and instead gives it a narrative weight based on your character's experiences. If we're talking numbers, we're talking about the number games, right? So that's the point of the conversation, because there's lots of people, probably most people honestly, really like the number games, and they like working with the numbers, and they like the more board gamey aspects to it because they're fun. Like, I love board games and I love doing board game things. So having a TTRPG that is a board game, I think, is like kind of the best parts of both worlds in a way.
Exactly. It's the part I like. I'm like, man, I get to do this thing, just fun, and this thing at the same time. Let's go.
Like, its only limitations are there are only rules for whatever they make rules for. So
yeah,
like Pathfinder, really, really good game. There's very little social mechanics, very little mechanics really outside of just combat. There's enough to do some kind of stuff like, oh, you could work, but you just roll on a table, and that's kind of what you do. You know, maybe you need to go and find a job first, but that's just a skill check and then another skill check, and then you're doing there. There's nothing really else contextually. So I'm going to stand by my same statement. Despite my understanding expanding, I don't like attributes. I think attributes are more limiting, and they are not representative of even reality. Because, like, stat games are also simulationist by design, because the whole point of putting numbers on a thing is to attempt to simulate why they're different than other things, like to remove homogeny in a setting. Like, a character is different than another character because they have different numbers, effectively. And some games go more simulationist when they try to add a level of realism to those numbers, and other games are more gameplay, where they're trying to make gameplay things that are fun but are not necessarily like related to how impactful an object actually is versus another object. And like the best representation of this is like Pathfinder's item traits, because that's how you're like, oh, this weapon has this item tag, this item has this item tag, so this is why I would pick this weapon over this weapon. And it's all about building strategy. When, like, if we're gonna be real, many swords operate mostly the same, except for some minor differences that are really only pronounced at high levels of skill.
Like, there's a lot of times, not every choice you make for the Pathfinder weapon is equal, because there are some weapons where you're like, damn, okay, I am losing a dice type, like I'm going down a dice size, but I'm gaining this. And then other times where you're looking at it, I'm like, what the fuck do I get out of this? Why would I even pick this?
Yeah.
Because all the swords operate pretty similarly, but like there's the chance of like, oh shit, this one has disarm with it. Like, okay, I can run with this. Oh, this one I can have in my offhand. Okay. There's a lot of those choices that come up. Um,
Yeah.
but there could be way more interesting choices to make there.
But yeah, so like I find attributes to be something that, like, okay, I'm playing a wizard, so I must have a high intelligence. So then any skills, any things I select for my wizard, if I'm trying to be optimal, which again, if we're playing a game, if we're playing more of a board game type deal, then you're going to want to play optimally for what you're trying to do, or efficiently for what you're trying to do. Then you kind of get stuck in that. And then if you are trying to set yourself up for success in combat, because maybe you're anticipating a rougher, rougher tactical challenges in your game, well, then you're going to want con, because more life points means less dead. And you're going to want reflex or dex, so that you can get the most AC out of your, mage armor, or whatever, or have a higher reflex saving throw, so you don't get dunked on by reflex based saves.
Yeah.
And so playing a talky wizard, a wizard who's really charismatic like Gale from Baldur's Gate, becomes not a good choice. Because in all honesty, even though in Pathfinder there are ways that you can play a charismatic wizard and be good, because you can use that third action in your round when you're not casting spells to do something like intimidate, or to bone maul them, charisma doesn't help you anywhere else in combat. And once you intimidate a target, unless you have certain feats, you can't intimidate them again. So it becomes worse because there's no saves, and unless you're a charisma caster, charisma just doesn't do anything for you. So, Gale's a bad wizard build in these kind of games.
I mean, even actually, I'd say he's worse in Baldur's Gate, because like unless you're playing Gale, because in outside of it, you really don't need charisma for any of your like side characters, because there are very few situations where they are forced to make a charisma save.
Yeah.
Like in the actual video game, and because also much like D&D, there's like very few. It's like I think hold person's a charisma save. I think that's kind of it.
No, there's a good amount of charisma saves. It's mostly Joe, like the asshole abilities of trying to like gain control of your character, and even then, a lot of those are wisdom saves. But there's some that
there are some, but like if you're going to have a stat, because this is what I do whenever I play Baldur's Gate 3, and I play it on hard, and I've had zero downsides of doing this. The moment I get access to my party and my camp and everything, I take each character to the respec mirror. I dump their charisma down to 10.
Yeah.
And I readjust their stats to actually make them good. And like that's the first thing I do, because the only time charisma is useful on your tabletop game is for your main character, who's going to be doing all the talking. Like, let's be real. And then a real tabletop game where you're actually going to be doing social checks.
Yeah.
Because in that instance, I've played a charismatic mage. It's useful because you, as the GM, was giving charisma opportunities out of combat. So that gave it the value. But if it's purely like, if we're purely doing a dungeon delve thing, what's the point of it?
Yeah, and my world has been flipped upside down since I discovered Legend of the Mist, because before I used to be a big advocate for the 3 pillars of gameplay, and there are many ways where having a charismatic wizard is good, because you can convince people to help you and to do this and to do that, and to diffuse situations. And like if you want to play like even mechanically a character who's good at talking, it's not a bad idea. I still agree with that to some degree, but it's now that opinion has been softened quite a bit by the idea that, okay, but Pathfinder is a tactical simulation game. It's an RPG tactics game. So if I wanted to play a game that gave more like benefits to more role play / social type actions and things like that, then I probably should be playing a different kind of game, right? Because if I'm not playing at least mostly tactically, then what's the point of playing Pathfinder?
I mean, I still think, like, it comes down to just what's the type of flavor game you're interested in. Because it's again the idea of like 2 modes of play, really. Like, there's just that hard switch of like, all right, it's combat mode, all right, it's story mode. Because I think it's a fair takeaway to be like, this game doesn't do this, and it's kind of just an extra tack on that we're doing. Why do it in this game? And like, the only answer I come to is, well, oh yeah, because Pathfinder's fun, and like, in playing it, and I at least don't have the same issue where it comes to like, I will put stock into playing a Pathfinder not as a tactical simulation game outside of combat, because the party and the story of the GM is, I think, as integral to the game as like the core rulebook.
I mean, sure, but then wouldn't there be better TTRPGs? Because I'm not even talking Legend of the Mist here. I'm talking about other number crunchy kind of games, like Call of Cthulhu, for instance. A very, got lots of numbers, and there's Savage Worlds, which provides a lot more of a dynamic range of character types that are not so combat focused. But Pathfinder, it's inarguable that like 80% of the rules in the game are combat focused.
Oh, 100%. It's a constant, like, I wish it wasn't like that. I would love more.
Me too. Me too. But I've realized that in more ways than one, there are just other games out there, that do more of the spread in a more equal fashion.
Yeah, like 100%. There are games that focus on it more, and I think also harness. The big issue I have with Pathfinder when it comes down to it is I think there needs to be a level of honesty when it comes to what type of game it is, and I think taking D&D, even D&D, with the same thing, because it really is that game of you can be anyone, do anything. No, not really. not if you're running it pure off of like rules, because like you have all these classes, sure, you can make whatever story, but like, is the stuff that a GM is doing, is that a selling point for your game? When instead you can just like, yeah, by the way, this is a really good like combat sim game, and you can tell all these cool stories with it. That part's on you, though. It's like, yeah, fair enough. That's a worse marketing tag, to be for real. But like, that's more honest of what it is. And at that point, I think it is just like, it's just the fact that if the game is fun and the GM cares, I'm game, because it's when it comes to like stats and numbers and all that too, and that is a big point of why I like Anima Beyond Fantasy so much. Sure, on one hand, it's because of the really good campaign experiences we've had that 100% paint the system a lot better than it really is, like, sure, easily. At the same time, there's a lot of really good decisions that game makes, surprisingly good decisions, and like surprisingly well-made books. Like it's still insane that we'll find a new game from 2025 with shit layout, and then this random weeb game from the 2000s. It's like insanely well formatted. Yeah. But it also just has a lot of issues. But the part that sells me for like art in general, I think it's the reason why my taste in things is so eclectic and like strange, is that the core thing I love is passion. And so if the game feels like it was made by a bunch of people who give a shit, and there's a lot of things, it's not an objective marker at all. It's very much a you know it when you see it kind of vibe. And the same goes for the GM. Because like, I will care about something when the GM cares. I will care about anything that someone makes artistically when they care. it's been a long since value of my life is really struggle to like give a shit about something if it's arbitrary. Because then what's the point? What are we doing here? We have a limited time on this world. Why are we wasting it with this? Like, let's just do something that like you obviously care about and that we're not both kind of like on.
Right. Yeah.
And so like because of that, the GM and like the story they make out of the game, if the game isn't fully intending for it, like I will still put stock in that, in like what story we're playing, the narrative, and like the overall campaign and the other characters, because everyone clearly cares. So like that is an integral part of the game when I sit down at the table.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, so like I'll give Anima its flowers, that its freedom of character design allows you to lean more in certain directions than other kind of games do. Like in Pathfinder, for instance, you can't be so non-combat focused. Like everything just kind of boils down to combat, and it's just most of the rule set. And in Anima, it's mostly combat as well, because all key related abilities are combat focused, like pretty much 100%, maybe like 90% if you know, for the odd here's and there's. But when you have magic in psychic abilities, you have for some part at least really fun, unique abilities that allow you to solve problems in very interesting ways. Magic
Creation
more
magic.
especially, because there's just more spells that can do things. But psychic, you can do some very interesting problem solving too, depending on what kind of psychic you are. Though I would argue that half of psychic abilities are mostly combat focused as well.
There's a chunk of them 100%, like, because the one I have the absolute most familiarity with is telekinetic. Telekinetic has a lot of, I think, outside utility, because the idea of you are able to move things with your mind is something that like you can't just translate to combat. But in the same way of like, you'll have stuff that's like, I have pyrokinesis. So like, what applications outside of, I light our campfire?
Yeah, what applications outside of, I want to burn this thing?
Exactly. Like, fire is inherently a destructive thing. Like, cool. But then like light, for example. Light has a lot of outside things.
Not as much as you would think.
Enough that like we played a character, like Devin played a character with light psionics that like largely their combat thing was I shoot a big fucking laser at you. But there's still other bits you can do with it. Teleportation is another. That one is such a good utility.
Yeah, I mean inherently. But I think you forget about just the fact that like you can do a lot with like one or two abilities, so it feels like there's more that are not combat related. Because we'll look at psychokinesis right here. So minor kinesis, pretty non-combat. It's just about floating small objects around. Psychokinetic impact is just hitting something really hard with psychokinesis, mostly combat focused.
Oh yeah.
Psychokinetic trap. It's about targeting someone, mostly combat focused.
I mean, that one you could utilize, because what if you're hunting? Which is
how
hunting
often are you playing a psychokinetic hunter?
Maybe I'm sitting in a tree and I see a deer and I like trap it and then I shoot it.
We have to be honest here.
I am.
Right. That's not honest. When did you ever hunt a deer?
If we're playing a game where we have to track rations and shit.
Yeah, okay. Sure. When do we do that? When does anyone do that?
I'm saying that's an application that's not pure combat, unless taking an action for hunting counts as a combat, which also is a really funny interpretation.
Sure. But you would pick this ability up not for its hunting purposes.
No, you'd pick it to fuck someone up in a fight.
Right. Psychokinetic shield, mostly combat. Psychokinetic armor, mostly combat. Motion detection, pretty good all-rounder. I would say actually mostly non-combat focused.
That's a really good, like, we're camping ability.
Yeah, or I'm doing espionage, all kinds of stuff. You know, big focus. Repulsion, I would say it leans at least 60%, if not more, in combat's favor. It's mostly just about preventing you from being hit by things. Or being touched by things, pushing people away from you. mostly a combat ability. Ballistics, 100% a combat ability. It's just about shooting
100%.
something like a bullet.
Yep, that's what I mainly used.
Shatter, mostly combat, though you could argue that you could use it to destroy objects in an environment, but that's a niche case scenario that doesn't come up that much in the game.
In actual use, because I had Shatter. Shatter is easier to pull off out of combat than it is in combat, in the same way what will eventually come up as like ground control. Like both of those are really good abilities, but they are significantly more like usable outside of combat because you're not tracking a bunch of other things. But Shatter does have, I think, a lot of, because you break equipment and breakage is pretty big.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can like fuck over a door that you need to get in or whatever.
I'll argue it's like a 50-50. I think there's a lot of reason to break things in non-combat scenarios.
I think abilities like that are significantly more cool because I like the abilities that you have a combat application, but then there's still but then the implications of the ability and how it works open up a lot of outside of combat solutions to problems. Yeah. It's a cool way to design your abilities.
Psychokinetic flight, pretty universal. I would say it's useful in any mode of gameplay, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I use that all the time.
Except I guess social, but even then, floating above someone I would say is inherently intimidating, so.
I would say so too. I'd be intimidated if that happened to me.
Hello, Holy Epa. We're talking about anima at the moment, but we're talking about systems in general. Organic psychokinesis, I say it's 50-50. It's good in and out of combat. You know, usually it's used to give your allies flight in scenarios, but it's also good to be able to just throw people around.
It's in the same way as flight is like a good utility thing, because that just means you now can extend that utility to your friends.
Yeah, but also you can just use this to send people into space.
Which I've done.
Ground control, I would say, is mostly non-combat, though there's definitely some combat. It's a niche combat thing that can be more useful out of combat.
I'll be honest, it is actually one of the encounters that sticks in my head the hardest. Is using ground control when a dragon was trying to dig and breathe fire into us in a small cave. And I was like, fucking, it's that pure psychic thing you want when you play psychic of I am hands out, hard focus, nose fucking bleeding. Like I am straining my brain. I feel like it's going to explode by trying to do this really insane thing. Like that encounter we had in the mountains with the dragon trying to kill us, and I was saving everyone with ground control, was so cool.
Mm-hmm. Ironically, a combat scenario, but I agree it's mostly a non-combat type deal.
I mean, it was a combat scenario in the way of it was trying to kill us, but we had no way of actually like fucking over the dragon at that level. So like our objective in that combat was to avoid and like hide.
Then we have atomic restructuring, which is pretty universal. I can see uses for it in and outside of combat in equal amounts. And then major psychokinesis, which is, I would say, mostly non-combat, but also you can drop big things on your enemies, and that's pretty cool too. So I'll give it like a 70-30 split for combat.
It is yet another thing.
Non-combat.
It's yet another bit when it comes to how psychic actually plays. Because in your head, you're like, yes, I will be able to just scale up my psychic stuff for like everything I can do my turn. But in actual practice, the amount of investment it takes makes it not super good in the middle of a combat unless your numbers are very good.
Unless you're really high level, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, since you mention it, let's take a look at light, because I'm sure you're going to be surprised.
I might, yeah. I remember Big Laser.
So, first, manipulate light. Pretty diverse. Not really useful in combat. Create light. Again, pretty diverse. Not very useful in combat most of the time. Flash of lights. Blinding power. It's for blinding people. It's very combat orientated.
Very. There's like a couple of like outside combat situations that I can think of, but like it's avoiding a combat maybe, but that's still like very combat focused.
Screen of light. This is just a light energy shield, so combat focused. Hologram. Mostly non-combat, I would argue, except for a few niche scenarios. And laser.
Yeah.
Combat. So
I know that one was coming. I remember that.
It's pretty balanced. Granted, it's not as expanded as some of the original ones in the book, but if we count, we have 1, 2, 3 pretty non-combat abilities, and 1, 2, 3 pretty combat abilities.
That's a better mix-up than I was thinking, because like that is I like that ratio.
But still, and what I said before, psychics are like pretty 50-50 when it comes to combat focus versus not combat focus for their stuff.
Yeah, I like the fact that Anima actually gives you ways to play around like and not have pure combat stuff. Like it is a cool thing that the game does, but like it doesn't take away from the fact that a core amount of a lot of gameplay for a lot of tabletop games is fighting.
Yes. And I don't have a problem with that, because no matter the type of game, even in Legend in the Mist, I prefer combat. It's one of my favorite things.
Like, I can't do that in real life. I can talk to people and make friends in real life. I can't like spin kick a dragon. So like which one am I going to want to play? You know?
So I don't have a problem with this, and I'm not mentioning it because of it. It's more of and I'm going to ding Anima for this as well. Anima does not really have actual gameplay mechanics or systems for non-combat stuff. You could say, oh, but there's the lawyer system or whatever. What it boils down to is skill checks. It's mostly just skill checks, which is not really a gameplay mechanic as much as it is just like a conflict resolution. There's no game, right? If you were to remove combat from Anima and just play with that, mostly what you would be doing are skill checks. There's no mechanical anything you're doing.
Yeah, true. And the only possible counter I'd give is like if I'm booting up, say, I just keep seeing on my timeline, if I'm booting up Knights of the Old Republic and like I'm playing that game, which is surprisingly D&D, like if anyone here hasn't played it.
I mean, it's a turn-based RPG game, so yeah.
I mean, no, it actually is a full-on D20 like stat system with the 6 like D&D stats.
Yeah.
In it. That's what got me. But I like in the same way that I would consider playing through Knights of the Old Republic story as part of the game, I would still say that like the actual narrative play of something like Anima is still gameplay.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't have the rules for it in the same way that like watching a cutscene and picking dialogue options is like doesn't have, I'd say, hard rules for it in the CRPG, but like that's still gameplay.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that there's not much to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Because if we were to compare it to... I'm trying to think of any...
You said we got to ban the Legend of the Mist. So that was what last stream was.
I'm just trying to think of any other games. I mean, the best I can really think of is any games that give special feats for like how you talk in a scenario or what kind of things you can do. Because like Pathfinder has things like, oh, you get benefits when talking to a crowd, you know, or all this kind of stuff, which is kind of at least more gameplay-y choices and abilities that allow you to do at least mechanically different things.
Yeah, like making an impression is a thing that I don't think we do that much.
No, not really.
But like there are mechanics around certain like I really like the skill feats for charisma, to be honest, in Pathfinder.
Yeah,
I really think they're fun, and I wish that more skills had that same like level of skill feats.
I wish there was more, and I wish there were more systems that they worked into that made them more interesting.
I would just love it if we had like I would just love it if every skill had more skill feats and we could gain them a little more often.
Yeah.
So that way, like, if we're gonna have this, because it's not gonna break the game, because if the game's built and balanced around combat, then adding narrative stuff is just extra candy on top.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the thing, right? Is it's in all reality very, very feasible for games like Pathfinder or Anima to have whole gameplay mechanics dedicated to, social situations and crafting and all kinds of stuff. Things that give you actual mechanics that let you feel like you're making important gameplay decisions rather than just allocating enough stats to do the thing well enough.
Yeah.
But that would mean a lot more rules, because by the very nature of these games, I mean, look at how big these rule books tend to be when they're mostly about combat.
True.
So if we added anything else like social, then it would just double the size of the book effectively, or at least close enough. So it would be a lot, and it would be a lot to track, and it'd be kind of a headache. So, that's why they're designed the way they are, because there are some games out there that do exist that don't have combat as their main focus, that are still kind of like numbery type of games. Again, I'm going to point to Call of Cthulhu. It's one of those type of games. Because in Call of Cthulhu, if you're getting into combat, something's gone terribly wrong and you're likely to die because you're not playing heroes.
Yeah, you're just guys.
And games like the Genesis system has all kinds of interesting mechanics for at least adding different dice to checks, so that can apply to more types of the game. It's not just combat. You can get, boost dice for social encounters, and all of those dice come together to tell interesting stories when you aggregate all the results into what you're doing in that scenario. It's really hard to talk about without like just being more specific. And so there are some games that do add that kind of number mechanical board gamey, I guess, aspect to other parts of the game outside of combat. But they're not the main ones that people tend to talk about. And most of the games that people tend to talk about and play are just very combat focused games. And people are very, very happy to have a very fun combat game that's fun doing the thing that they want to have fun at, which is play combat, and then be much lighter in comparison everywhere else to do those things.
The another game that I think could be a good example in that lens is Vampire specifically.
Yeah.
For Vampire the Masquerade, because that is a game where like it is really clear combat. Like the older editions, they were definitely trying to be more combat oriented, but the problem is World of Darkness combat is just kind of boring.
Yeah.
When you take it pure mechanically and how you can do stuff.
Yeah.
So they're narrative, like role play heavy games, to where the main combat encounter you might have in like Vampire is social combat. Like that is a much bigger concept in that game. Goes out the window. Actually, no, I was about to say like there's some of it, like the only one that's super combat heavy I would say is Werewolf, because obviously that literally a core mechanic what they've added in 5th edition is like it's harder to stay in your big werewolf form unless you are killing something every turn. But like Hunter, funnily enough, Hunter the Reckoning isn't even a combat game. More of the gameplay of Hunter the Reckoning is about like figuring out what the threat is and figuring out a way to fight it. Like combat in that game takes like a couple turns on average, because the combat is more about you scrambling to not die than actually having a grip tense like fight with a monster.
Yeah. White Wolf games, Scion also leans a lot more combat focusy. But there's a lot of non-combat, because the system, the engine that those games use is very universal in design.
Yeah.
It does everything relatively the same.
I'll also say, when it comes to the actual gameplay of it, Chronicles, which Scion is, Chronicles was directly trying to go more combat focused, because the beginning of Chronicles was jumping to like Vampire the Requiem and all of that. And Vampire the Requiem, a big point of that game was to return to like what the idea of first and second edition Vampire was, which was more combat focused. And so Chronicles does just lean that a lot more than like the older World of Darkness games. But it is still like a universal like engine the games run on. And it's the same way of me saying like, the intense differences of like combat gameplay of Rogue Trader versus Dark Heresy. They're based off of the exact same engine. The only difference is like character creation works a little different and your stats are named different.
Yeah.
That's really the only difference between those games.
Also, I looked it up. The engine is called StoryPath. The StoryPath system.
Nice. Okay, I always thought it was called the White Wolf engine. That's good.
It's just because White Wolf made all the games that use the engine, so
yeah, exactly.
You know,
and I've seen no one else use it.
Yeah, I think so. But there's probably some games out there that have.
I would hope, because I like it when an engine is able to be used and like they have license for use. So, and I want more tabletop devs to like a thing and then iterate on it interestingly.
Yeah, and like again, even though that engine is not as combat focused, it's still fun because there's still the fun of the mechanical aspects of, getting your total dice because it's a dice pool system based on the number of dots you have, plus many feats, abilities, or talents, or traits, or whatever, they all have different things you can add to your character to be better in certain kinds of scenarios. There's a lot especially in the White Wolf style games, there's a lot more abilities that are just like narratively contextual abilities. They don't really apply to a system. It'll be like, oh, someone in a place and, you can make use of that when you're in this area, for instance.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I would love to see the fidelity of like the Pathfinder system opened up in the same way to allow for the same kinds of things, which you kind of can do, because at the end of the day, there's not a lot to the engine of StoryPath, because it's mostly just skill checks, just done in a slightly different way. But they have more like skill feats, effectively, if we're comparing the two. And they have some systems, like in Vampire, you have the beast system, the
compulsions,
but they lead to like when you get the blood dice.
There's bestial failure, bestial success, which granted, like the compulsion stuff is a 5e specific thing, but like, and same with the compulsions, but I think at least the bloody crits have been a thing in the older games. But yeah, like there's elements of that's the thing I'll shout out. I think it's fun about that game. I like the idea of dangerous crits. You crit, but because it fits the tone of what WoD is supposed to be.
Right.
Because WoD is a game where like, sorry, you're not going to have a happy ending at the end of this. Like, you can get you can end up okay, but that is the best case scenario. Also, shout out, I really like this solution Dead Phoenix says.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that too.
Yeah, we should just add the word social to combat turns. I want to socially off guard somebody,
See, but that's the thing, right? That would be interesting if they had systems that acted kind of like how combat does, where you can apply certain conditions and statuses, but are more socially coded instead. That would be cool. I like, as much as it comes across as a joke, I do think that would, funny enough, make the game more interesting and more fun, because you could play different styles of characters who are not just all adventurers. Like, it would be really, because like the repercussions and the consequences of social encounters are different than combat ones, just plain and simple. So having the ability to determine those outcomes in different ways and be much more involved is very interesting, rather than I roll to convince this person, yes, no, move forward. Because honestly, when you get down to that, like Genesis kind of has a fun idea with it, where you have all the different dice combinations where you can determine like, okay, The answer is yes, but because of the number of goodness, I don't remember any of the terms. Open it up. I do love that my game folder is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I have my TCRPG PDF folder. Is it just the advantage, disadvantage?
Yeah, so well, kind of. So it's the how many boosts, how many setbacks, ability, difficulty, proficiency, and challenge. Like the combination of those types: successes, advantages, triumphs, threats, and failures. Like you can get a scenario that has you successfully do the check and you have a triumph in it, but there's also a threat produced, creates a, narratively speaking, more interesting results, because doing that social conversation is like, okay, so I really got what I want, but maybe I've gotten on this person's bad side, and that's what the setback is, or that's what the threat that generated was.
Yeah, it's a good form of something that's fun about that type of skill check is I really like skill check systems that have they kind of, when you think about it, it's just giving you improv prompts. It's giving you a yes and or a no but. Like I think that is a cool thing for it to do because when utilized really well by players, it just builds really fun systems. Like it's just I always think of the moment for me it clicked in a Star Wars game where we were running away from stormtroopers and I had a failure with advantage. And so I did the typical movie thing of instead of shooting the stormtrooper behind me, I shot a steam vent and slowed them down. And like I had that idea, I pitched it, and it's that moment when like you're first doing it, especially early in a tabletop game where you have that like, oh, I get it now. I understand. I can do things that aren't just stand still and attack.
Yeah. And honestly, that's why I like Legend in the Mist, because you can just do different types of things on your turn and get bonuses. Like hiding in Legend in the Mist is something that's a little bit more easy because you're not like trying to just succeed on a dice check or not. It's about, okay, what tags can I apply in this scenario to hide more easily? Like, is there something in the environment I can hide with that will benefit your check? Is someone distracting the enemy? If they have a status like that, that can also benefit your check. In Pathfinder, you can kind of do the same kinds of things. You can get cover, which can help. There are a variety of things like distracting the enemy can actually reduce their perception checks by so much. It's much the same, but less interactive because it's mostly like in-system mechanics rather than like scene or narrative contextual kind of stuff. But this all kind of like we weren't talking about stats, but this is all stat related, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're looking at these systems, when we were giving our wizard example earlier, if your system is asking for combat proficiency because it's a combat-based game, like Pathfinder tends to be, and honestly, like many of those same kind of games, even Anima tends to be, then you're going to have a priority in your combat stats. And I dislike attributes because I feel like that limits you in a way that is less fun than if we could just ignore attributes and just have different, skill proficiencies. Because, like, to be honest, right, if we're not including the fighter bonus of +2 to hit, then what difference does it make if other marshals have the same probability to hit or not? Honestly, like, what does that remove from you if the rogue is as capable of as hitting people as you are when they have like less dex or whatever?
The only bit that it really removes is just like the abilities that fighter gets, and how easy it is to get them. but like that's not a number thing. Like it's purely a like that is the one number advantage I think they have is the +2, which gives you it does increase your crit chance, but like
Well,
yeah,
I'm not saying like if fighters still have that benefit. I'm just saying that like beyond that, you know, compared to other martials, you know, I feel like if the rogue decided they didn't want to have a lot of dex and wanted to be more charismatic, allowing them to still be able to hit as accurately as the ranger would not. I don't think anyone loses in that scenario, right?
not particularly like I think that is an annoying limiter because I would not call myself a hater of like the numbers, the stats, the attributes. It largely I'm a hater if it's implemented poorly. Like I think 5th edition doesn't do it the best, even though Pathfinder it's roughly the same. I think the math is just better. But like there are a lot of moments where you're playing these games and you have that moment of okay, I can do this other thing that's pretty fun, but I'm going to limit how good I am in combat. And like that's always going to have to be a thing you level up when instead it is just really fun when you have a game that's like yeah, you're going to be fine at combat. Like you'll be good, dog. But here's another bunch of aspects you can play into. It's still the reason why I shout out the attribute and skill system for White Wolf. Because like I think that is a system with how it is built of like strength, sure. Can you utilize that purely in a combat sense? Yeah. But when you're making your character really physically strong, you're also opening yourself up for using strength for a lot of outside of combat stuff.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of utility you get out by being strength, and then if you say, I'm going to go dex instead, well, you have a different route that's also equally fine for combat. Same with agility, I think. But those are the 3 that will really apply to combat checks.
I don't know about agility. Agility is mostly used for defensive maneuvers, like dodging and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, like it's still combat-y, but like you're going to have a stat that will be good because combat, but it's not purely like strength isn't a pure like a damage stat as it often is in a lot of other stuff.
I mean,
why do you level strength?
I would disagree because athletics in Pathfinder, for instance, athletics is a really goated skill.
It is. It's very good.
It determines, being able to lift stuff narratively. That's very important. It also determines how far you can jump. It also determines how fast you can swim and how well you can climb. A lot of non-combat stuff. Maneuvers.
Because athletics, like I'll say too, like there's a lot of great out of combat situations you can utilize.
Yeah, and athletics is also just a really good skill in combat too.
It's really good in combat.
It's a good skill in general.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's going to be a choice you make in Pathfinder is like, do I want to go athletics? Do I want to go like charisma for these kind of similar maneuvers? Like what direction do you want to take it? But I think having a system where you are equally benefited out of combat and in combat in a game like Vampire the Masquerade by making your character like a strong character, maybe a less physically strong character, like you are still going to get by fine. Like that I think is a good system to have for attributes, when in a lot of other times it kind of just puts you in the build situation where you're like, damn, I kind of just want to do everything, huh? And the game just doesn't want you to have good stuff. But then it makes you ask the question of like, I mean, what's the harm in me just having a good likelihood of success for a lot of out of combat things, or at least a couple skills that I'm really good at?
Yeah, I'm not saying that like everyone should just be good at combat, so diversify in other ways. I'm just saying that like statistically speaking, if we're playing because you want to be optimal, you want to be as good at doing the things or not, I don't think main attributes are actually really beneficial. And like when you're comparing it to the White Wolf or the story path system, that game is not a combat sim. First of all, it's a very different kind of game, and you can definitely make non-combat and combat-based characters. Like not every attribute can lean into combat equally well, but the system isn't a combat game, so that's fine. You having characters who are not combat oriented is pretty normal, honestly. in story path systems.
Yeah, like I bring it up as an example of attributes that I think are implemented well.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, again, it's no different than most other TTRPGs when it comes to strength, because, you know, who knew being strong in general is just handy for doing things.
Yeah. I mean, it is a game that finally lets you roll strength for intimidation.
True.
Like there's stuff like that where the fact that I can come up with I can look at the sheet and be like, in a game like Pathfinder or D&D, I am strong. Therefore, I can do all these cool things. I can lift something. I can push someone. I got athletics. I can jump high. Like you can do all the athletic things. But then you take it into something like in Vampire, and you have high strength. Well, you could roll. What if you have a character? Maybe they're a gym rat. You could do strength and science to talk about exercise science.
Yeah.
You could like you're driving and your wheel locks up and like it's stuck, and then you can reach across to like whoever your driver is, and you as the big strong guy just wrench the wheel in one direction to try to force it. Strength driving.
Yeah.
That's the part I think is a huge benefit, and it's the benefit of having attributes in a game that's not trying to be super combat-y. And that's why I like the implication of attributes in that. Because
yeah. I mean,
if we're going to try to simulate reality with attributes, which I think is a failing battle, because no matter what, you cannot simulate a real human being with numbers.
Right.
And so it's going to end up gamey no matter what you do.
Right.
I think opening up for more it's sideways abilities instead of just up and down. My strength becomes better. Is I can utilize this ability in many different ways, so I am a more versatile character.
Yeah, and to be fair, I do think decoupling attributes from skills is probably good and should be done more often. Just because
it would be so fun if Pathfinder, if I could roll like more often, I could roll a strength arcana, because maybe there's some magical thing that requires actual physical force behind it.
Yeah, or just honestly, one of the more simple ones is using dexterity for athletics, like climbing and stuff like that.
Yeah, because pure physical strength helps you. But it's a really fun video of this guy I follow, Magnus something, who's one of the best climbers in the world. And he just goes around and hangs out with other athletic people. And he got like who was like, I think he was in Norway, of who was like the strongest man based on like the last strongman tournament. And he wanted to see how much it translated pure, really good upper and like lower body strength. How much does that apply to climbing? And at the most, the guy can like do a pull-up. And like he can do a pull-up, he can hang on really well because he's just strong, but the muscles aren't built for like climbing. It's a different muscle set you're doing.
Well, and it also requires some level of like flexibility, and also sometimes the muscles just get in the way. Exactly.
Like the takeaway they had, because the guy, like the strongman, was really fun. Like he's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Was him being like, I did better at that than I thought. Like I was like, I knew I could do a pull-up, but like a lot of other parts. And then that's what Magnus was taken away. Is like, so you're basically like, for him, he's like, you've kind of just done all the beginning work of climbing. That's already taken care of in another way. It's purely like your limiting factor is that you've never done this before. He's like, yeah, basically. And like that's a takeaway of that's a moment you'd use Dex athletics. Yeah. You can't just lift weights and then suddenly you know how to go bouldering.
Right. Yeah, and so, you know, I mean, I agree, and I think if we're talking about like decoupling stats or like skills and attributes, I think there's definitely a way, even in those kind of games, there's still there's still the skills that you mostly use together, because that's just the thing that, you know, they're mostly meant for, as you're talking to someone.
Firearms is the default. This is how you shoot a gun.
Yeah, and like no matter how strong you are, it doesn't really change how you shoot a gun unless you contextually add a moment, which I will say, because they're decoupled in that way, that does give the ability for contextual narrative to apply to the stats in
I rip
ways.
off like a mounted gun in placement as a physically tough Brujah, and like I'm not super great with firearms maybe, but I can, because I am super strong and vampirically strong, I can pull it off and then mow down a bunch of like I don't know, ghouls who are running after me.
Yeah.
Like I can do that, stand still, plant myself, and use this gun with more mobility because I am physically strong. To make up for the stat difference.
Yeah.
And like that's the cool thing you can do with that. Because in that instance, I think that is my preference and the way I think you can make attributes really fun. And it's just give me the option to use my stats creatively. Because man, like attributes as a system do feel really limiting. Because when you're making a character in like a very strict attribute system, where you're like, I am playing a strong character, it's going to limit some of the choices you make, especially because like playing an intelligent fighter is a route, but it's not the route people go. Intelligence is viewed as a dump stat for a reason. But if I, as a strong character, could equally make use of intelligence in creative ways, I think that's a significantly cooler method, significantly cooler system, and would make the attribute feel a lot more like an elective choice rather than I am being forced to play around in a very specific way. Also, yeah, I think Dead Phoenix, it is a boring thing to just be like, yeah, what's the fighter's thing? Oh, they get legendary in like combat. I feel like there are more interesting things you could give a fighter. And I say this as I am a fighter defender. On my tier list, I did put fighter at S tier, but that's because in a lot of character concepts and character creation, I found fighters what perfectly fit the idea the best. Because I think in Pathfinder, you can utilize fighter in very creative ways. And I really it's the same reason I like this attribute system I'm talking about. I really enjoy being given like a toolbox and being told to find something out of this. Like you as the player get to build some significance for all of this and justify it and tie it together. Like I enjoy that, being given that. So in all honesty, I would just like it if I got that same feeling in a lot of other areas of the game. And I feel like you can do that. It's just the answer to most times is give me more toys and give me more horizontal leveling, which just makes the game bigger and more complicated.
Right. And talking about, it's a thing they very specifically wanted to avoid, replacing attributes after 1E, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everything is based on the engine, right? Because I do agree the White Wolf system is very interesting for mixing and matching and adding those interesting contextual moments where you can add a fun flair, the Brujah using the giant chain gun because they're just really strong, and being stronger there is more relevant than their dexterity in the scenario, is really, really cool. But you don't get that in D&D or Pathfinder unless the GM allows you to, which they can, but that's not the game. That's just the GM doing cool GM things, which, a GM could do anything, so, that's not a good talking point. Another stat that honestly I grow to dislike the more I think about it is HP. HP points. Because I find HP to be... HP represents how durable a creature or character is, but it doesn't have any feedback associated with it that makes doing damage feel good. Unless, of course, big number equals hee-hee.
Yeah, like it's just HP as a thing is one of those bits of it's the choice of what type of character are you playing. Are you playing the character that's like never going to be hit or be in a scenario to be hit? The only thing I like in the concept of actual having HP is I think it really affects role determination in a fun way. because there is a level where you as a character have a really high HP pool, and you're like, I'm in the front, and having a giant number being whittled down is fun. In the same way that, like, I think the most satisfying tanking system I've played in is Anima. It's super fun to tank in Anima. But just that's satisfying in that, like, hey, I'm a badass right now. But like, that's HP, and it also comes to the point of like why Constitution is like the most boring attribute, because like I can't make a Constitution skill check in like Pathfinder. I just have a big ass health pool.
Right.
Or like con saves is like kind of fun. That's kind of it, and I find that super boring because there's nothing tied to con, and it's why everyone has memed about the idea of a Constitution like base spellcaster that like with the Muscle Wizard, because everyone has kind of wanted this stat to have another use other than I get HP points.
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, people just want a con-based class because they're just like, we don't have a con-based class. I want the option because I want a con-based class. No reason, actual reason. They just want one because they don't have many.
Because I want one, because I think it's in that same way. We don't have one. I'd like to see something like interesting used with con, because right now it's boring. I think like the only idea that people I think jump to is like, I use my life points for magic. It's blood magic. It's like, I mean, I guess, sure. Like the gameplay of I hurt myself to do a thing, so my HP is a secondary resource is fine. But I think that there has to be more interesting ideas we can do with it.
I mean, I think there are fun mechanics around HP. Dead Phoenix just brought up a good one where like constructed armor, where they get to have HP and they lose hardness. Really cool. I really like that as an idea. And there are times you mentioned Anima, and like Anima's a really fun game to talk about HP in, because most characters have relatively the same HP. You know, some characters may have like 20, 30 more HP or not, but that's only like one hit difference. Like, not typically that big a deal. But when you have a character who does focus on HP or gets special abilities that help them use HP, like Astrid with her Sheely that gave her an additional 250 HP pool, you know, that feels good because you are mechanically just so much more durable than other people, and it's something that you can really lean into. And you can kind of get that in games like Pathfinder. Like the barbarian can just have so much HP. It feels really good to be up in front. I like on occasion playing tanks, and I like being the person up front doing the thing. We're playing Grand Blue Fantasy, Devin and I, and I've been playing Vasaraga, who's a big scythe wielding tank regenerator type character. And I love the fact that I just stand next to the boss most of the fight, eating all their hits like it's nothing. It's really, really fun. And HP can be interesting, but in most cases, and practically speaking, like in like 80 to 90% of the time, HP feels very unimpactful because there's no I said the word earlier, there's no feedback when you get hit most of the time in games. And
yeah, like it is a thing that just happens to you.
Yeah.
And it's the bit of like, that's the reason, shout out like the exceptions to it, because the fun part I think of implementing HP is in Anima, it is an active choice. You are investing in a thing, and it scales really fun. But like, if I want to play a character in Anima who does other things, like I'm not forced to spend parts of my character sheet to invest in health to not get one shot. In the same way that like unless you have a good game plan, you should probably give yourself a 10, a 12, maybe a 14 in your con, which means you have to deprive that from somewhere else, like for your stat line. In Anima, you have a default. Your default is pretty good. It's fine for the math, for the most part, and like if you have other avenues, you'll be fine. that's the part I think is really annoying about it. It is an investment that gives you no feedback, and then you kind of it's nice to not get one shot, but also like, man, I'd like to do more interesting things with these stats.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking back because Defane just brought up the soldier from Starfinder, and I think it would be very interesting if con was more the determining factor on how heavy armor you can use, and also classes that had like a higher, like a scaling HP modifier that is based on like how high your con is, rather than like most classes where you know, you get like 10 plus con or 12 plus con. A class that gave you, you know, 5 HP per level per bonus in con up to, you know, like a plus 20, or end game, you know, plus 25 per level, because then your character would be real tanky and like in a mechanically satisfying way, real tanky, because at that point you would be eating boss hits like they're nothing, and that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, like honestly, I like the idea of con being tied to armor because it makes sense. Like if you're wearing super heavy armor literally all day, like that taking a toll on your body. Like that is a strain. Can you physically like withstand that? Because like strength is normally the idea of like, are you physically able to move in it? Like, I don't think that should be the limiter. I think it really should be, can your body actually do that much activity and have that much weight on it for a while? Because that's something they train in like the military. You gotta train up to getting used to carrying like 60 pounds of equipment on your person.
Yeah, it's very endurance-y.
You'll need to have that.
Honestly, my favorite form of HP is Savage Worlds wound system. And we played a little bit with this in the 333 because I stole the system because I think it's really fun, which is you have a wound threshold number, which indicates how much damage you need to take a wound, and it's a multiple. So every time you take 6 damage, you gain another higher degree of wound for that thing. And what I really like about it is because when you play a tanky character in those games, it feels really good to receive the same blow as someone else and yet receive a less severe wound, a less severe injury, because that makes you feel, mechanically speaking, actually tougher than other people. You're not as injured by the same level of force, which I think is really cool and provides that feedback.
It makes it in an interesting way. Like, I think it's a similar idea as adding a form of health pool that's tied to your mind is another interesting avenue, because I think you can have the level, because really what people want and what you want out of it is, I want to feel like me investing in this thing mattered in some way, and like I feel like it was important and cool. And so when you have a game that has like stress, like, I mean, 333 has that. There's morale in the Cosmere RPG. You have that idea of my character might not be physically strong, but I am mentally strong.
Yeah.
And so when I invest in this and I resist it, it feels pretty cool, because I think there's a big failing and a big annoyance of a lot of HP stuff. It's just like, man, I just got hit. Or the fact like I'm playing a wizard and I'm just always going to be the little string bean who just takes all the damage. But the idea that like, no, because I'm doing this work mentally, I am much more resolute. Like cool, I get this immediate sick feedback, and it adds legitimacy to like figure out what you're going to invest in.
Yeah, and like I think when we're talking about certain stats, right? It's all about just how it comes together, because at the end of the day, even though the point of the subject is like what stats should be here versus not be here, it's not really about that. It's more about how should these stats be in the games that they are representative of. Because in D&D and Pathfinder and Anima to some degree as well, because honestly the attributes are nice for some things, but they really just feel super unimpactful for other things, especially when you get later game, when you're like, oh, this plus 20. I mean, okay, maybe less when you include natural bonuses, because natural bonuses are scaling, which are really interesting. But like, just because your character's strong doesn't mean the attribute is going to help you for certain skill checks unless you've been putting your natural bonuses into it. But for those games, tangented. For those games, I don't like attributes because attributes just feel like a number I'm adding for the sake of having a number, and I don't feel necessarily like I'm actually whatever more than any other characters. You know, it's like, oh, I feel stronger than other characters because I can use athletics better than other characters. It's like, well, yeah, except the wizard isn't putting points into athletics, so you know, you are going to be stronger than them without stats because they're not focusing on those skills in the same way you are. And if you are like a stronger character than another character who doesn't have as much strength, but you're both equally focusing on athletics, then the difference is so minuscule that it's hard to notice regularly. You know, +3 strength warrior versus a +4 strength warrior in Pathfinder. It's a 5% chance difference. Most of the time you're never going to see the actual like mechanical difference between those two stats.
Yeah, like it's a very tiny thing, and the most you can do is like the most that kind of system gives you is the novelty of, whoa, I am a wizard but I have a high con. Isn't that novel?
Right.
Like that only exists because it's kind of that choice of why would you do that.
Right.
Like hence the character I think is a really fun future character I will play is the fake fighter wizard.
Right.
Because like the novelty of that is like I am playing wizard in a way that you really like, why would you do it in this direction? Because like you can get the same results another way easier and probably better, but the novelty of it is what makes it fun. And when in reality, having this type of character wouldn't be a novelty in literally most other systems that play with attributes different.
Yeah. And like one of the things that's it's also just about like impact, because also extra benefit to the story pass system here. Every point in a stat or in a skill gives you an additional die that you roll. And that is an immediate feedback thing that the player receives mechanically, because you are holding more dice with more stats, and that feels cool.
Dice systems, dice pool sweep. I love dice pools. Dice pool rules so hard. I adore it. It is so fun because if my gameplay of a tabletop game is rolling dice, I want the way of rolling dice to feel as cool as possible.
And something that's interesting, because this is not a trait that I share, but there's a lot of players out there who like big number. Big number is a big thing for a lot of people. I was talking to my wife the other day, and she just says nothing just compares to rolling over 100 on inanima in the game, even though it doesn't really change anything. It's just the number that you're seeing in front of you. You know, you're doing math with more things. If you just remove a 0 off of what you roll on inanima most of the time, then it's just d10s, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who like that big number. Like, I like rolling lots of dice. I like seeing plus 200 on my checks. You know, it's such a fascinating thing to me because I don't see it that way. When I look at these things, I think about, you know, practically what's happening. What's the, like, is the thing I'm doing more accurate in these systems, less accurate in these systems? Am I failing as much or not? Most of the time not, because it's all statistics at the end of the day. And most game designers have some strangely like similar statistic appeal for how games should be balanced, mechanically speaking. But there's a lot of people who like big number. And that's just one of those things that like it's funny because it can slow a game down because you're just working with more numbers effectively. In anime, it's even funnier because most of the time you just have skills in 5s or 10s. So it's not even like you're getting the full range of the numbers. You're just adding a 0 onto a d10 most of the time
Yeah,
to get the effect.
it is the thing of like, if the only form of gameplay, like when we actually take it into account, like the gameplay of me interfacing with a tabletop game is I am rolling a dice. So then having the dice roll be as dynamic or interesting and as possible for directly interfacing with your system matters. And I think there's also the element that doesn't get thought about a lot, where the tactile feel of your dice system does impact the feel of your game, and I think you can have a huge mismatch. I think the Cosmere system, I think would serve better a different dice system.
Yeah.
It does not feel like it should be a D20 system. And in the same way that, like, I think the scaling of Anima would feel lamer if we were playing a D10 system. And it's like that kind of idea of like the math would be perfectly fine. Because I completely agree. Is if you take it into like the actual math and the numbers behind what's going on, there isn't a functional difference if you remove the 0. But if you're playing Anima's like scaling becomes goofy as hell. You're doing insane things, getting a super high roll, and then being told you're physically, your body, like physically and spiritually, is unable to reach these heights yet. That is a cool ass feeling. It fits the tone and the style of Anima a lot more than like, oh, you did so well in your check, you got a 30, and be like, 30 is like way different than, dude, you did so well in your check, you got a 320. Like, holy fuck, that has to be good. It's a tone setter.
And it's interesting because I think you've hit the head on the nail when it comes to the idea where it's just like in Anima, when you're rolling, typically, especially like early game, you it's hard to get above 100 unless you have a lot of points in a particular skill, secondary ability, whatever. And when you start hitting 200, 300, even though if we're talking about scale, it's not that different. And in sometimes it's not, again, because like, for instance, early level Pathfinder, you're rolling around 15. And then end game Pathfinder, you're rolling around 35, right?
Yeah.
Which is 2.5, maybe close to 3 times, because you can definitely get above 40 on some checks. And in Anima, it's that same thing. It's you're rolling around 80, and then by the end of the game, you're rolling around. I won't even say 320, because even like when your characters are at level 10, 320 is still a pretty high number. But I would say you're rolling somewhere around the realm of like 280, you know.
Like, at most, it's going to be whatever your key mechanic, ability, or skill is that can reach that consistently. Because, like, if you're a psychic and, like, I don't need to invest in attack and defense as much because I have these other ways of doing it, in that case, you're getting up to your cap really easily. And if you're like, my character is all about attacking, then you can invest in that. But you're investing in, like, one thing to get that high, unless you open roll. But, like, it's the difference, because like I'm a happy enjoyer of the big number make me feel good, but I also do view it in that way of there's a level of like, oh yeah, the actual math here going on is like, this isn't as crazy, or this isn't anything different from these games. It is purely the aura of it is the only way to describe it, because I make that point of in Pathfinder, rolling a 40 is like, that's sick for Pathfinder, like, certainly, but that is one aspect of Anima's ruined me, because the sheer difference of saying I rolled a 40, holy shit, to I rolled a 320 or a 440, for Pathfinder, it's cool for Pathfinder, it's cool for D&D. For Anima, it's cool for every single other game, because what other game plays with numbers that high? And so it just feels sick, because the ability to do that isn't consistent. So the moments it pops off and you double open roll up to max,
Yeah.
You have those narrative moments where it feels like your character locked the fuck in for a second.
Yeah.
And that's something you don't get in, I think, a lot of other tabletop games. And that's just the way of, like, your tone is set by your dice system and how your stats are used.
Yeah. I think it's I think it's a really fascinating exploration. This is why I wanted to have the conversation last week and not talk about Legitimus all the time.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of elements to it that kind of fly in the face of logic, right? Like, big number, but it's like, yeah, but it's all scale. So it's like, doesn't matter, big number, you know, mini dice. It's like, yeah, but you like in story path, you just pick, or it's just the number of 10s you get, you know, which is going to be a very small portion of that. It's like, doesn't matter, lots of dice. Genesis is like that too, like lots of dice, lots of bonus dice, makes me feel good. And I think that's fine, because enjoyment is, at the end of the day, a base feeling. It's not a logical thing. You know, we don't feel good for logical reasons. We feel good for the things that make us feel good, you know.
A joke hits because it's funny, not because it makes the most sense.
Right. And like, that's why absurdism is a thing, because it's funny because it makes no sense.
It's literally happening on Twitter right now and TikTok, because there's a clip of JoJo Part 3 that's been going around. I don't know if you've seen this at all.
No, I have not.
The whole bit is there's a fight in Part 3 where the enemy stand's ability is like illusions and fog that like conceals things. And there's a scene, it's like 30 seconds, where Joseph, he catches something is weird, and he tells them, like, guys, we need to get out of this town. And so he thinks it's a car, and he puts a hand on the car, and he just full body vaults over it to, like, do
no, I have seen that. Yeah.
And then, like, he's screaming because it's a fence and it's going to impale him.
Right.
And, like, when you look at it in context, because I have the crazy opinion that JoJo isn't that bizarre. It's just artistically weird, but, like, shit's explained. It has a logic, it has a reason. Even this scene is, like, the reason he's doing this, even though he could avoid all damage if he just opened the car door like a normal human being and then found out it was a fence, is because Joseph's entire character is doing something extra in the moment, or, like, doing something because he thinks he'd look cool doing it. And then it bites him in the ass.
I mean, yeah. Actually,
but out of context, it's insane. Like, what the fuck is he doing? He vaults a car, it turns into a fence, and he screams for 20 seconds.
Yeah. I think it's where like, it's not that bizarre. What the bizarre thing in JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is the characters. Period.
Yes.
How these people do not act like normal people. These are not reasonable normal people. That like, if a JoJo character was in another anime, they would stick out because they're just so weird.
There is such a hilarious scene in Part 6 where the danger in the situation is Weather Report, the weather controlling stand, is making it rain poison dart frogs. He's not actually making it physically rain poison dart frogs. No, he created a tornado in an area where they were there and brought it over. And the key concern for the main villain is his pants are $10,000 and he's going to get slime over it. Yeah. Like, that's his complaint. And, like, that is a JoJo thing. That's a pure JoJo thing. It has internal logic, is the way I'd put it. I don't even remember what the original point was, but, like, it is just an element of doing, like,
big numbers is good.
Big numbers is good. Sense. Doing something for the sake of its enjoyment and, like, the absurdity. Oh yeah, it's because it's absurd. It's absurd when you look at that scene and are like, what the fuck is going on? But there's a lot of enjoyment out of it. And, like, there's just everything around JoJo is very fun, but out of context, it's some insane bullshit going on. If we were assessing JoJo on pure logical story framework, I would say the early parts have some dog shit story. But I think the characters make up for it in the same way Dragon Ball does. I like Dragon Ball for its characters a lot more than I do its plots.
Yeah. So, like... Oh no. Another thing that we don't have the time to talk about as well is I always find it interesting weapon damage numbers. Like how much damage does this weapon do versus this weapon does. Because what always happens is there's bad weapons and good weapons, mostly based on how much damage they do. Because I gotta say, Pathfinder, you keep throwing all these D4 weapons with really cool weapon tags on them, and no one is taking them because they're going to pick a D8 weapon or a D10 weapon with 2 tags because it just does more damage.
There is just so many times where I'll come across a weapon like that, where it's like, oh, D4, but it does all these things. And sure, if you're playing a character with like maybe simple weapon or anything like that, if I want to play a really versatile weapon that still does good damage, I'm going to take the Faust Shard.
Yeah.
Like, that, just the pole arms have that. It's like there's a decision you will make where do I take the D12, and that's all it does is D12, or do I take the D8 that then can trip and like it has like trip and what's the tag for you do more damage on your second attack?
Oh,
you're making multiple attacks and you do like slightly more damage.
Is it momentum? Yeah, why would I use a D8 weapon when I can do a D4 that does +1 while flanking? Yeah, it's exactly that.
I have max 5 damage for my 1d4 weapon, or I could have a D8 weapon that can, I don't know, just do a D8 of damage. Yeah, it's bits like that where I think it's really goofy. It's the part of games that are really funny.
Forceful is the one that gives more damage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it is really funny when you think of it because it's so gamey. Yeah. Which I just like a lot of gamey elements and stuff. Like, I do find some fun in playing a game where we're like trying to pretend it's real life, and then there's a video game element to it. I will consistently find the bit like, hey, how are you doing? Well, on a scale of 58, I'm about 38 out of 58. I think that is a consistently funny bit to try to like contextualize game elements into the roleplay, like as a joke. Because like, if somebody attacks you, and like, can you in the moment be like, man, my neck's being split by like a D6 ass weapon right now? Like, is there like, that's not something you can represent. The sword sure can be bigger and everything, but to some degree, it's just the joke about how stopping power for a gun is a really stupid metric and doesn't make sense. Because being shot with a 9mm in the head is going to kill you the same way a 45, like a 45 is also going to kill you if you get shot in the head. You're dead either way. So like, what's the point?
Most weapons, even in real life, were not more effective based on the amount of damage they could do to the body, but by how easy it is to do damage to the other person.
Yes.
Well, not, it's why we use guns, right?
Fantasy has tricked us about the prevalence of sword fights, when in reality it eventually just became spear lines.
Yeah, they were spear lines for the most part. Then we had musket lines, then we had guns, and now we use guns. Because in all reality, a gun does less damage than a sword unless you have a gun that shoots many bullets. And even then, that's somewhat arguable. The body just doesn't need a lot of damage to die, is the deal. Because
no,
I'll tell you, a piece of metal flying through your body, we can all honestly say that the bigger that piece of metal is, the more damage it's doing to you.
Yeah.
So
like, I am taking that damage. Like, if I get stabbed in the chest with a broadsword, yowza, I'm dead. In the same way that if you shoot me and you maybe, for example, take a hollow point bullet, which all it really does is make the exit wound way fucking worse.
Right.
Like, that's going to kill you, and the only difference is, well, how fast you die. Like, that's kind of the only element.
That's not even really how it is, because it just depends on where you're shot. And
if you're
there's
shot,
a lot of weapons that do like gnarly things, like spears that have hooks on them.
Oh yeah, like there's a lot of elements of because I mean that's a thing with tri-points. Tri-points, like, they don't instantly kill you. The real point of a tri-point, like, tip is that it makes it impossible for you to be stitched up. Yeah. Like, that's the problem, where it doesn't kill you better than a knife wound. You just have a bitter chance with a normal knife wound than a tri-point.
Yeah. So like damage numbers with weapons are always silly, and it's the most gamified element in these games because the fantasy of these worlds is someone could take a great hammer to the head and keep fighting afterwards. Like, it doesn't matter if you're at full health or not. If I'm dropping 30 pounds of weight straight on your neck, you're gonna die. It's just, and it doesn't matter even if it's only 10 pounds. You know, I can still snap your neck with a mace. It really doesn't matter. And so it's like, is there a point to weapon damage? Because at the end of the day, all weapon damage really has done for me in these games is prevent me from using certain weapons to fulfill a fantasy because it just doesn't feel like it works and it feels bad to play, or makes me try to make a weapon work when it's not that good.
Me with whip.
Right.
I have an entire whip fighter, but it's really just can you get to advanced weapon for the better whip. Like that's honestly the only thing you need. And even then, it's just I'm taking so many steps to make a weapon usable. Like I think it is the different because the first thought I have in my mind of like a solution to it is like if every weapon had the same damage, I think it would be a bit more boring to engage with. And so then it's like, okay, so maybe instead of like, 100 weapons that are all slightly different, do we have like a handful of weapon categories that are like, these are light weapons, they deal a d6. These are martial weapons that deal a d8, and like there's a d10 weapon type. And then what the difference is you can then build a weapon being whatever you want by adding abilities to it. And like if you want to do d12, you have less abilities, but you do a d12. You want to play a d6, well, you can have a lot of like utility and tools, but you're swinging with a d6. Like, is that a better solution? Because then you're building whatever weapon you want, and I could have a d8 whip, for example.
Yeah, I think if we're talking Pathfinder, I think my solution would mostly be no weapons. Well, kind of. Weapon damage die is uniform, but different weapon types provide different weapon tags. And there are some two-handed weapons or one or two-handed weapons that can then roll a higher than standard damage die. And then you get the choice of, okay, do I want to do a little bit more damage? Like everything's a d6, but then when you two-hand, it's a d8, or do I want a weapon that does more versatile things for just a little bit less damage, Because you're still going to get those people who are like, I do nothing but two-handing because it does the most damage, point for point. But you're going to get other people and be like, yeah, but I like light weapons because even though I do, on average, depending on the phase of the game, 1 or 2 less damage per hit, I can trip, or I can shove, or I can disarm my opponent if I choose to. I feel like that would add a lot more versatility to the kinds of weapons people would choose for particular fantasies while still giving them some kind of mechanical benefit. Like I'm choosing short blades because short blades have backstabber, and I really like backstabber as a tag. It lets me do slightly more damage than other weapons does besides two-handers, as long as I'm flanking the enemy or they're off guard in some way,
Yeah.
or
I think it'd be cool if we had something that gave you a lot more legitimacy and points to picking your weapon. Like, it's still the thing of I think having a system where your choice is I can deal more damage or I can do more utility. I think that's a cool place to put the line. I think if every weapon felt the same, I would, I don't know. Then I feel like one of the things I would do is lock myself into like similar weapons. It's like, they're all the same weapon.
right.
Like there is a line of finding the point, I think, where does every weapon feel the same? Because in reality, every weapon's gonna kill you in like the same way. There's no other way to scratch it.
Yeah.
And like that's the gaminess interacting of like the weapon I choose, I still want some feedback of like
Right.
why did I pick a mace over a sword if they can deal the same damage?
Yeah, and there's a lot of games out there that have very homogenized weapons. There's a lot of weapons that are just like, oh, swords do this, daggers do this. You know, mostly it's damage. But for me, it's just something more along the lines of, I would rather feel like I can make more choices than less choices, because the game isn't just telling me, well, these weapons just do more damage for what you're doing, you know? Because that's what happens in Pathfinder a lot. Like in Pathfinder, most of the time, you're choosing from certain groups of weapons, a lot of foul shards, a lot of glaives, because they just give you point for point more damage and better benefits than other weapons, because they're good at killing, because it's a combat game. And it's like, oh yeah, I can disarm a person, sure, but like at best half of the enemies are using weapons and the other half aren't, and that's not useful. And then there's just whole classes of weapons that are just mostly ignored unless you're just trying to make them good because you just like those kinds of weapons. Pathfinder also has just a really, really annoying problem of, there's a lot of classes that are one-handed classes that need a specific weapon in order to do their thing, like Swashbuckler or Investigator or Rogue, where you need a finesse or agile weapon, you know, and it has to be one-handed. And it's just feels more limiting than what it is, even though there's like a lot of interesting weapons, and I think Pathfinder has really fun weapons compared to like D&D, most especially, because D&D is the worst. They've made it a slightly better, but not by much.
D&D is the one where like, yeah, there's like the weapon proficiency thing they added, which like cool, that adds some elements, or the feats that they did in Tasha's of like Crusher, Slasher, all that made it a little better. But it really was like, for a long time, like D&D is, do you take the longsword, or do you are you a classic and take the great axe? Like, or it's always a decision of, do you take the two-handed or one-handed sword? Do you want 2d6 or 1d8? Technically the 2d6 is better,
right?
But like, do you want, like, this is the weapon you pick, or you take the great axe because you're barbarian? And like, that's kind of the decision most of the time, because like that's all that matters is the damage number, and then you get the magic items. But like, the actual weapon you take doesn't mean anything. Like, why would I take a mace? So a mace in that game deals 1d6, so why would I take it? Because there are martial weapons in that game that are 1d6. When then you look slightly to your right and you see better martial weapons, it's like, well, this is pointless. They just feel there's no difference between them. So then the question is like, okay, so what's the point? It's on it. Like, I land, if I had to pitch a solution for the problem, that's why I pitch the make your own weapon kind of rules, because I think it would be fun if I could then be like, you know what, this character uses a weird weapon. This character uses something that's not standard. I can take it, I can build it, make it what I want, and like, it'll still be viable. Because I have a character where I'm like, man, I love the Khopesh as a sword. I think the Khopesh is such a cool weapon. And like, in Pathfinder, it's all right, but it is just a worse sword. I think it can trip. I think that's the, like, and maybe it has some other tags that aren't as good. But like, trip is always nice. It's just like, the Khopesh is really sick. I love it a lot. And that's not how I would build the Khopesh, is how it's in Pathfinder, if I'm remembering it correctly. And if I could make a Khopesh that's cooler.
D8 one-handed trip weapon. That's what Khopesh is.
It's solid. The problem is there's just better 1d8 weapons.
Yeah, there's just other stronger weapons than that. Like, trip is good on a weapon, but trip just applies item bonus is really its major thing, and you can trip while holding it. Like, the benefit of the Khopesh is you can use it with a shield and trip at the same time. But like, there's, I think, other just similar types of weapons, and there's some weapons that are probably better.
Yeah.
But maybe
They
I don't
just
know.
are.
Yeah, I'm gonna cop out. My fix for this is just what Legend in the Mist does, where there's technically no difference between weapons other than the tags you place on them if they're like a possession, but you can contextually add tags that you think are useful for that weapon that does make them very useful, and you can diversify weapons equally. A dagger and a sword don't necessarily do more damage than one another, but a dagger can be easier to hide, or a sword can be wielded with two hands, or can be like you could probably apply more damage type tags to a sword than a dagger, but the dagger can be used in different ways, can be thrown, for instance. And I think it kind of gets around the problem of like the homogeny issue, because you make the weapons unique and you give the weapons the traits that you want to give them. And so it doesn't feel like you're just using, like what weapon you use doesn't matter, because the weapon you are using matters because you made it matter to you for what you wanted.
Yeah, honestly.
But numbers and stats. So we're at the end of the stream here, but I want to ask one question, or I guess a couple questions. Which stats do you like the most, and which stats do you hate the most?
It's really difficult, I think, to answer, because like when I think about like what stats do I hate, I think it's con, because nothing interesting is done with it ever. And then more of my classes lean like Dex or Charisma. So like Dex is probably something I like some of the uses you can get out of it.
Well, I'm not talking just
like,
attributes. I'm talking like numbers on character sheets in general.
You know what? I like initiative. I like initiative as a number, because I like the idea that I can opt in and make my character act better in like first and quicker in combats. I think having that as a system is fun.
Yeah, that's one we didn't even talk about, because I kind of agree. I think there's a value to games. If anything, I wish like in Anima, there's a way you could make having good initiative more impactful.
And also, understandably, like I like the negative impacts to initiative in Anima. I think is like I like the idea of it. And it's still just like con or health and like how it's utilized, because I just want Constitution to actually like represent more. That's really it at the end of the day. I'm disappointed by how it's utilized, and like I think we could do better, but we just don't.
Yeah. For me, I think the stats I like the most. It's a hard one. I like skills a lot of the time, because skills I feel like are the ways I try to diversify my characters in like any game. Like, what can I do? Skills for me add, and depending on the game, like context that makes my character more interesting. I like in combat, in Pathfinder, for instance, being really good at intimidation can demoralize enemies, and you can build around demoralizing enemies, or having good strength can allow you to use athletics to, knock enemies around. Mauler builds are always really fun. It's always good to just feel like you have that control over an enemy. Or grapple builds, like the monk can be a really fun grapple build and throw enemies around the battlefield. I think that's really, really fun. And whenever I made builds for Pathfinder and for like a lot of other types of games, I always consider skills for like, okay, you do the combat thing because this is what everyone does, but here's how you can do it in a unique and interesting way. Where like I had my druid build, which is just like the little shit who's just annoying to deal with in general, and they had lots of decks because they could hide, and makes it harder to find them because they could create all kinds of foliage to give themselves cover and all kinds of stuff like that. So decks and stealth and everything made that more interesting. And also, like, I feel a stronger drive to pick attributes based on the secondary abilities or skills than I do like anything else, like combat ability or anything like that, because I want my character to be fun and interesting to play and play in different ways. And I don't find interesting the I hit good and do damage as like my main mechanic, because that's just, you're just playing a hack and slash in TTRPG form, more or less.
Basically.
So I like skills. I think skills are really good, and I don't think we really had much argument for skills today. It was mostly just like what systems use attributes better than others, which I think was an interesting conversation. The stats I hate the most. Oh gosh, I think I hate, conceptually speaking, weapon damage the most, because weapon damage is, at the end of the day, one, it's all combat, right? Like, only combat relevant. I could argue that attributes have use outside of combat, but weapon damage is only combat useful. And there's these lines where, like, I get constantly frustrated because I want to do interesting things in combat, but the interesting thing in combat is typically so less efficient that there is no point in doing it because we're trying to kill someone. I literally, we're playing in my wife's game, in Suzanne's game, and I'm playing a witch, and I wanted to go a summoner witch because witch is one of the few classes that can summon 2 creatures at once. Well, not at once, but can have 2 creatures active at once due to cackle. And I was like, oh, you know, I'll do this or whatever. But because summoning is just kind of ass in Pathfinder, because the creatures you summon are at best 3 levels under you and your friends, and at worst 5 levels under you and your friends. They're just so... They just don't do anything. You summon creatures so they can miss 90% of the time, is what it feels like. And it's like, this is a thing that I could do, and it's really interesting, mechanically speaking. I mean, every turn I get 5 actions because I give each of my creatures 2 actions and then 1, or I can even control my familiar to do 2 actions, even though familiars are also bad because they don't do much most of the time. But weapons are just like the epitome of, why are you choosing this weapon? Why did you choose this weapon? And more often than not, it's because it does damage, or it sets me up to do damage better in a way. You know, like, you're trying to optimize damage, and then you look for the little niche scenarios that you want your character to do. Or maybe you're willing to go down a die size to do the thing you want to do. But if I've never ever been convinced to use a D4 weapon, not once have I been convinced to use a D4 weapon. And funny enough, similarly, I've almost never been convinced to use a D10 weapon because they don't get like any tags, or like get one like shove, which is like, oh god, why would I pick that? You know, it's usually the D6s and D8s are like the prime weapon ranges. And in a lot of games, it's not even that interesting. D&D is just chock full. There's many tabletop games where you just look. Anima's really bad about this, by the way. There's just objectively worse weapons.
Oh, Anima is even worse because Anima has no abilities for your weapons. And,
yeah,
like,
well,
unless you're taking, if you're taking one of the unique stuff, but like, it is like, why would I not take why would I take a shittier weapon than like a normal sword?
Well, Anima does have weapon tags. Because they're not the most impactful. And Anima still just has straight up bad weapons.
It's like, In anima, I have never had the question of like, oh man, do I take this weapon or this weapon? Like, that's really not been a thing.
Yeah, because some weapons have throwable, some have precision, which precision's actually pretty good. Some weapons have one or two-handed. Some weapons have trapping, which can potentially be really good. So it does have tags. It does have things that can affect it. But despite that, there are weapons that are just objectively worse because they just have everything the same, but they just do less damage. That happens several times, you know? Or actually it's mostly just that, you know, they just do all the same stuff, or they do the same damage, but they're slower for your initiative for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange. Like, it's just weapon damage, I agree, I think is done really boring. Like, I think we can be doing some cool shit with weapons.
Yeah, I think removing numbers from weapons, I think, would only benefit them, because then designers would have to find new ways to diversify and make them interesting.
Make the decision justifiable.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to get running soon.
Yeah.
I only also mentioned because, listen, once the stream ends, I need to tell you about some of the Path XL shit we missed.
I'm watching it right now.
Yeah, the fact that we can import our builds into the fucking game.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I think I've never had fun with Witch or what is it? It's Witch in this. I've tried Witch builds and it never worked out well. The new fucking looks like a Chase unique where you ignore curse limits.
Yeah.
That's
insane. No, there's some the crow weapon or crow gloves looked really interesting.
Or the spear that gives you a fucking holy dive.
Yeah. But that's gonna be it for us for now. This isn't a web stats are bad in TTRPGs, but I do think that we need to start doing some more interesting things, or just not having certain types of stats in games just because we always have. Like, I don't think Pathfinder is served by by having attributes as like a thing in the game, because it feels more like it limits you more than it helps you. And simultaneously, weapon stats we just talked about, not good. But we talked about how the story path system makes attributes more interesting because it uncouples them from skills, allowing you to kind of mix and match in some interesting ways. So, you know, I may be a Legend in the Mist fan, but I'm also a big RPG board game fan. I do like my numbers. So
it's fun to just make a cool ass build. Like, yeah, it is very much like, don't walk away from this thinking stats are bad, using numbers in your game is bad. When, like, in reality, it should be, how do you use the numbers?
Yeah.
That's the real determiner.
But yeah, that's going to be it for us. Alex, anything you want to leave us off with today before we head out?
Yeah, if you're a fan of lore content, that's what I'm doing. I've been back into the grindstone. I put out a vampire video a few days ago on vampires from Vampire the Masquerade who don't drink blood, they just eat you. And that's pretty fun. It's a fun rabbit hole. And next week, I'm going to have a video on steampunk wizards. So stay tuned. Go subscribe to Glue Boy.
Yep. As for me, everything is still much the same. But by the end of the month, well, not the end of the month, sometime into June, I believe my mom is going to be living up here more often. I'm going to start making content. But it's probably going to be Legend in the Mist content. I've had this really good idea because of Legend in the Mist and just the kind of game it is. I'm probably going to start doing shorts on Legend in the Mist builds, because you can really do those in shorts and really, really well. Also, there's some really cool stuff with Legend in the Mist, and like, my players haven't gotten to see it, a bunch of it, but the books are full of really cool things. The art in them is really cool. Some of the kind of enemies you get to interact with are really cool. Heck, one of like this example ones they give is like the boggart or whatever, not the boggart, but like the house hob. And the house hob is like, gets more difficult based on whether he's like angry or not in the scene.
Oh, that's fun.
And I love mechanics like that. And they have all kinds of mechanics like that. All kinds of interesting lore. Like, I'm not much into the rustic fantasy design, but I think that you're doing some really cool stuff. And maybe I'll have to genuinely dive into it again at some point. Because I do have the adventure path. They have the Heart of Ravendale adventure path that's got some interesting things. It's a little bit not action-y enough for me because I played through it solo a bit, but it's got some really cool stuff, and I think it gets better later on. It's just like the second chapter is just really rough because it's just but anyway, but that's gonna be it for us. I guess we'll go ahead and say bye.
See ya.